Why, hello there, everyone. The Street Fighter 6 closed beta test, which I will miss very dearly, has just concluded, or at least as of recording this video. I'm recording it just a few hours after it ended, and I'm still sort of collecting my thoughts over how I feel about the game. And first of all, let's just get performance and netcode out of the way, because the majority of this video is going to be me gushing about the mechanics and the features, and I have no idea how long that's going to end up being. So just to let you know, if this video ends up being kind of long, well, if the video ends up being kind of short, then I can use my recorded match footage, matches that I recorded off stream on Saturday as the B-roll footage to look at. But if this video ends up going on really long, then I'm going to have to use some of my footage from the stream, which I was only able to stream at 480p. So just keep in mind, if you're looking at the stream footage, like with the stream overlay, obviously the game is going to look better in real life than on a stream that was being streamed at 480p. But also keep in mind, if you're looking at any of my recorded match footage, and this is a similar problem I had with Exoprimal, the Exoprimal closed beta test. So I guess Capcom games are just like this on PC, or at least as of late, Capcom games have been like this on PC. I can run the games, I can run both Exoprimal and Street Fighter 6 just fine on high settings. And the reason I'm restating this is because I don't know how many people watching this will have seen or heard me talk about the Exoprimal beta test, because I'm pretty sure there were a lot more people playing and interested in the Street Fighter 6 beta test than the Exoprimal beta test, but that is a different topic. I have a video for that on the channel already. But I'm able to play these games on high settings and run them at 1080p 60 FPS just fine. By the way, I have an i5 processor, Intel i5 processor, 16 gigabytes RAM, and an NVIDIA 1660 graphics card. So I'm sure a lot of epic gamers out there will have builds much more impressive than mine. So you should probably be able to run it just fine on PC and run it at least at 1080p 60 FPS, right? Which is what I'm concerned with. But for some reason, with both Exoprimal and Street Fighter 6, when I try to record footage of it, the game still runs fine, mind you, but then when I check the footage, it's so choppy, so I have to lower the graphics settings quite a bit whenever I record it. For some reason, not so much when I stream it. So if you're looking at the recorded match footage, which takes up full screen, it should definitely be a better quality video, but you'll notice, especially with the textures, that the game is turned on some low settings there, because those textures, especially on the aircraft carrier stage, you can tell those textures get really low when you put it on low. So obviously the game is going to look better if you're playing it at medium or high settings, which is what I was doing in the stream footage. But like I said, that's 480p, so just to let you guys know, the game looks great, right? And you should be able to run it just fine. But keep in mind, like if you're trying to record footage of the game, or if you're planning on streaming the game, you might want to wait until the game's been out a little bit and then hear what people have to say about computer optimization, right? Maybe it's like an NVIDIA issue or something like that. Also, similar to a problem I had with Exoprimal, is that the game looks great. Both games look great when I'm playing the game on high settings, which, like I said, my computer can do. But then when I have to lower the settings for recording, for some reason, it makes the game look so sharpened, so jagged. It's as if the game doesn't have any anti-aliasing. What's even weirder in Street Fighter 6's case is that in the Battle Hub, things looked strangely sharpened and jagged without any kind of apparent anti-aliasing at all. But then when you actually get into a match, things looked strangely fuzzy. So I don't know what's going on with that. Obviously, if you're playing on console, you won't have to worry about that at all. So I'm thinking I might just have to end up getting the game on console because of that, but I have to mention it, right? So that is what I have to say about the performance of the beta test. And as for the netcode's great. Some people might be expecting it to have poorly implemented rollback, such as that found in Street Fighter V, because Street Fighter V does in fact use rollback, but it's not implemented very well because it's not really utilizing any kind of input delay frames, so it's just pure rollback. So you get your opponent teleporting all over the place in Street Fighter V, right? But people have to remember that Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite came out after Street Fighter V, technically. At least I think it did. Someone might want to check me on that. But anyway, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite actually has great netcode. So a lot of people who played Street Fighter V but not MVCI, they were maybe a bit worried about the netcode in Street Fighter 6. But I can tell you, rest easy, because the netcode in this game is great. Obviously, though, with it being a beta test, there were some issues, like several of the matches got interrupted by some kind of connection error, which I can only assume has to do with it being a closed beta test, right? Also, I did get one crash. I'm assuming it has to do with some kind of optimization with my PC build, because when the game crashed, I actually got an error notification from OBS because it crashed when I was streaming. So I don't know what happened there, but I did get one crash and several connection errors, which booted us out of matches. But presumably, those things will be fixed by the time the game releases, or at least the connection errors, right? Because this was a beta test after all, and we still don't even have a release date for the game. Okay, so with all of that said, I can now start talking about the mechanics, which I just have positive things to say about. And this is probably going to take up the majority of the video, so buckle up here. I am going to do my best to explain all of the mechanics in the game, all of the new mechanics, I mean, because a lot of these, well, actually, I think every one of these mechanics were already technically confirmed and talked about before the beta test. But if you're like me, you weren't really paying attention very much, because whenever I saw a video talking about the mechanics, I was just like, yeah, whatever. I'll learn it when I get my hands on the game, right? Because I didn't see much value in learning the mechanics if I would only forget them immediately after, because obviously it's a lot easier to actually learn the mechanics and learn how to apply them if you get to play with them at the same time, or at least immediately after learning it. So a day before the beta test came out, I studied up on all of the mechanics that were announced and revealed up to that point. But obviously, the minutia of said mechanics are going to be things you can only really learn once you play the game, because you get to see the frame data of everything. Because even though this was a closed beta network test, whose goal was to test the online connectivity and the netcode, right? They actually did let you do training mode, which is crazy. How it worked is, in the Battle Hub, obviously you could just go into a queue, which is nice, but also they had these arcade cabinets, and if you sat down at one, you could play around in training mode until someone came and sat down at the cab with you. So people actually got to mess around with the training mode, which is a crazy thing to have in the first beta test for a game, right? And then not only that, but the game is going to launch with full frame data information. Unlike a certain series, Tekken 7. But not only does it come with all of the frame data information, you can also visually display it as well. You can visually see the frame data, which is crazy. So there are so many user-friendly and nice features about this, which I'll get to. I'll touch back up. I made a list of all the features I want to talk about, and I'm probably missing some things, but I'm going to go through that big list once I am done explaining all of the mechanics. So you can see all the frame data and everything, so people were really able to dig into the mechanics now, right? Even though these mechanics were technically confirmed already. So the big thing about Street Fighter 6, and if you're looking at gameplay footage, you can see what I'm talking about, right? You have your HP bar, right? At the bottom of the screen, you have your meter for super, okay? Normally in fighting games, your super meter is also used for things such as your EX moves, right? However, in Street Fighter 6, that meter at the bottom is only used for super moves, okay? And every character has a level 1, a level 2, and a level 3. That's it. Although the level 3 actually has another version if you're at, I think it's 25% HP or below, some kind of threshold. If you're low on HP, your level 3 will actually be slightly powered up, and if you land the level 3, you'll get a unique animation, which is really cool. But anyways, the bottom meter only used for super, okay? So you might be wondering, what is that green meter at the top directly below your HP? And that's where things get really weird and really crazy and maybe a little divisive. At first, I didn't know how I felt about it, but this game actually had the inverse of a new car smell effect or honeymoon effect, because I was kind of torn on the mechanics when I first started playing, right? It seemed a little cheesy, but the more I started playing it, it's actually great, and I started liking the game more and more the more I played it. Also, by the way, I put 31.7 hours into the beta test over the span of it being live. So, what is that green bar? That is your drive gauge. I don't remember if they ever explicitly said what it's called, but it's used for things called drive rush and drive impact. So I just kept referring to it as drive gauge, and I haven't really questioned what it was actually called until now. So if you say drive gauge, people will know what you're talking about. You could also just call it drive, but I don't want to say drive meter because then if you say meter for short, people might mix it up with your super meter. So I called the meter at the bottom meter, and then I called the gauge at the top a gauge or a drive gauge, right? So if you can't use the super meter for EX moves, how do you use EX moves? Well, you use the drive gauge for EX moves, okay? But not only that, like I already mentioned, you get access to things called drive rush and drive impact. I'll explain drive impact first because drive impact is a bit more simple than drive rush, and it's also a lot more oppressive, at least at this point in the game. I think by the end of the beta test, people got a pretty good grasp on how and when to use drive impact and how to deal with it. But drive rush, I think people are yet to crack that open completely. I think we're going to be seeing way more crazy drive rush stuff once the game has been out for a while. So let me talk about drive impact first. Drive impact is a move that uses drive gauge, like I said, and it's a big move that uses, or it has 2 stacks of armor, okay? So you throw it out and it has 2 stacks of armor, so if you hit them 3 times, you can break them out of it. You can also throw them out of it, okay? Or you can do a super, and a lot of supers have armor break properties, right? So there are answers to it, but it's a big move with 2 stacks of armor. It is technically reactable, but it's kind of hard to react to. You kind of have to be expecting it or looking out for it in a lot of cases to actually properly react to it. But the big thing about it is that if they block it, they get pushed back really far, okay? And if you're mid-screen, it's not really that big of a deal for the person blocking it, right? It is a big deal for the person using it because it uses up their drive gauge, and it's a big deal if your drive gauge runs out, which I will elaborate on later. Also, with it being reactable, most of the time in mid-screen, I think it's better to just block it, but it is technically reactable, but if you get a read or if you are able to somehow react to it, you can also counter it with your own drive impact. So basically, it becomes a game of who's going to drive impact first, who's going to lose patience and drive impact first, because typically whoever uses drive impact first loses that trade, right? Because if you drive impact first, the other person can drive impact you back, and then because they can armor through your drive impact as theirs is being active and starting up, right? So you don't just want to throw it out, right? Unless you get a read. Because, like I said, whoever uses it first loses, okay? So there's so much mental stack in this game already because of that, right? Because it's this super strong move that leads to a full combo if it lands, right? That can be thrown out at any given time. But you want to sort of bait it out of your opponent. You kind of want to pressure them into cracking and using it early. Also, you want them to use it up so it uses up their drive gauge, because that's also kind of like a second game you're playing at the same time. You're trying to draw out their drive gauge and deplete it. But another big thing about it is, like, not only is this already a big enough mechanic from mid-screen, but if you hit someone who is blocking it and push them back into a wall, you get a wall splat. And this move on block pushes you back really far, okay? Like, imagine on each stage, divide each stage up into thirds, right? You have the mid stage, you have the right side of the stage and the left side of the stage, and imagine they're all equal in size, right? Split the stage up into thirds. If you're on either the left third or the right third, and your back is facing the wall, right? Like if you are on the if you're closer to the corner than your opponent and you're in either the left third or the right third and you block a drive impact, you're going to get wall splat. So as soon as you get that close to the wall, it becomes very pressured. You get a lot of pressure. The mental stack just exponentially increases as soon as you get to the corner, because now it is so much more valuable for your opponent to drive impact you, because then if you block it, you get wall splat and they get a full combo, okay? So as soon as you get into the corner, if you're the one cornering your opponent, you're trying to bait out their drive impact because you know they're feeling pressured, right? You can try to just throw yours out, but if they are being cornered, they're going to specifically look out for you just throwing out drive impact like that. So in most cases, if you're fighting someone good, if you're fighting someone that is somewhat experienced or has patience, they are going to specifically wait for you to use drive impact, and they are going to drive impact you back, or they're just going to simply jump out, right? Which is a classic thing you can do when you're cornered in a fighting game. So you might want to kind of stay at a distance where you can anti-air them if they want to try jumping out, but also you're far enough away so that way if they drive impact, you can react to it with your own drive impact or a super or something like that. So it's just layers upon layers of mind games in the corner, which is crazy, right? Also, like I said, you get a wall splat and a full combo if you hit them while they're blocking in the corner, right? So now I'm going to explain what happens if your drive gauge runs out. Mind you, I haven't even talked about drive rush yet. I've just talked about how you can use your drive gauge for EX moves and drive impact, okay? So if you run out of drive gauge, you enter a state called burnout, which is really, really bad. One of my main issues when I first started playing this game was I was really trigger happy with all these new mechanics, right? So I was using drive impact like crazy, and I was using EXs like crazy because, you know, I learned these combos with EX moves. Why would I not do the EX move every time I get a hit confirm to get as much damage as possible, right? But I'm telling you, you need to fear going into burnout, and you really only need to burn yourself out during doing a combo if you think it's going to kill, right? Or if you're just very confident that after the combo, you'll be able to keep them out or something. Because if you go into burnout, okay, there are so many things, there are so many nerfs you get when you're in burnout, okay? I don't even know if people found all of them because literally on the last day of the beta test, I was seeing that people were learning more new bad things about being in burnout state. So if you're in burnout, you can't use your drive gauge. You can't use drive gauge for anything, right? Because it's empty. So you're having to wait for the drive gauge to refill. Once it runs out, it starts refilling at a set rate, right? You can replenish it by attacking or blocking, but it's kind of scary getting up that close into mix-up range of your opponent in burnout. So in a lot of cases, I would just try to stall in burnout, but obviously there is a risk/reward of replenishing it by attacking or blocking, right? So you can't use EX moves, you can't do drive impact, and you can't do drive rush. You also can't do parries, which I'll get to as well. But the reason I'm bringing it up now is because if you get wall splat, if you block a drive impact and get wall splat while in burnout, you get fully stunned, like you're seeing stars spin above your head. And that gives the opponent to just do whatever they want, right? They can do a full-on combo starting with a jump in, which is awful for you, right? Not only that, though, but you take chip damage when you're in burnout. So if you block attacks in burnout, you're still going to be taking damage. And chip damage does kill when you're in this state. Also, level 3 supers do a ton of damage, do a ton of chip damage on block against an opponent in burnout. And also, if that wasn't enough, your opponent gets better frame advantage on hit if they hit you when you're in burnout. Or if you hit someone in burnout, you have better frame advantage on hit. So you actually have burnout-specific combos, okay? So burnout is just no good. You want to avoid it at all costs, right? So fearing it that much in the corner, it's going to, or anywhere actually, it's definitely going to limit the amount of drive impact spam. Maybe not at low levels, right? Like I said, when I first started playing with it, I kind of just spammed drive impact. But drive impact does use a significant amount of drive gauge, and that inherently prevents people from just spamming it like crazy, right? So that is something that just permeates the entire thought process, right? The game is obviously still Street Fighter at its core, but it's crazy that this one mechanic, drive impact, and by proxy, burnout, because using up drive impact can lead you into a burnout state. It's so funny how that one mechanic can create such an extra mental stack on top of a game that is already deep to begin with, right? Because underneath the whole drive impact thing, it's still Street Fighter, but the drive impact adds so much, and I definitely see that being the most divisive aspect about the game. I think most people really liked the beta test. Everyone that was playing it seemed to really like it, but I bet once the game comes out, any kind of negative opinions about the game are probably going to be related to the drive impact, because it is kind of cheesy and it is kind of oppressive. I can definitely see people picking up the game and trying it out and just feeling like the drive impact is way too much and way too dominant of a single, it's like way too dominant for just a single mechanic, right? But I like it, and I'm very much looking forward to where it goes, and I think as the game is out, like the longer the game is out, the less oppressive it'll be because people will get more used to reacting to it and blowing it up. But like I said, I think people actually got pretty used to dealing with it by the end of the beta test because you definitely started to see it spammed less because people started reacting to it better. Okay, so I've gone through EX moves and drive impact. So there are still 2 other things you can do with the drive gauge. You can do drive rush and parries. I'll explain drive rush now, and then I'll do parries last. So drive rush is a bit more nuanced than drive impact. It's a bit less cheesy. It's not just push a button to win, right? Drive rush is it's kind of like a command dash, okay? You can cancel into it from anything that's already cancelable. So any kind of normal moves that are special cancelable can cancel into drive rush. Parry can cancel into drive rush. So you can't just do it raw, right? But you can actually pretty much do it raw if you do a parry and then immediately go into drive rush. So using it that way, it's essentially a command dash, right? Which can put you up in your opponent's face really fast, so you can do it to force a mix-up situation, okay? So not only will it let you get up in your opponent's face really fast to do a mix-up situation, but it also improves the frame data of your next attack. So the first attack you do out of drive rush, it'll be +4 whether it's on hit or block. So if you land an attack after a drive rush, you're able to link it into something that otherwise couldn't be linked, right? So you're able to do a drive rush unique combo if you land an attack after it, right? And mind you, I don't know if I said what the actual number is, but it's +4, okay? So you get +4 frame advantage, hit or block, if you hit an opponent or hit their block coming out of a drive rush, right? It's just any attack is +4 after a drive rush, if you're doing it out of a drive rush, okay? But that also stacks with any other kind of bonus frame data you get from counter hits or burnout, okay? So if they're burned out and you do a drive rush, it's going to be even more than +4 added on to whatever the frame data normally is, right? And if you get it from a counter hit, you're also going to get better frame data, and it all stacks. So there's so much stuff to lab with this game because there are so many different ways the frame data can change, and it's really it's mind-boggling, right? It makes it kind of daunting, it makes it a little intimidating, but it also makes it really exciting at the same time. So people that love labbing things, I think they're going to really like this, right? So I said you can use drive rush like a command dash. It's +4 next attack. I did say it's also +4 on block, right? So you can force tick throw situations that you can tick throw off of moves that you couldn't normally tick throw off of, right? Because it's going to be +4 on block. You could also just drive rush up and throw someone, right? Because initially when you're doing a drive rush, you're doing a strike throw mix up, right? And then if they block it, you get a tick throw. If you hit, you get to do a special combo because of the extra frame data that it is affording you. And not only that, but you can also essentially break the drive rush by jabbing early. Because when you do a drive rush, you move forward a significant amount, but as soon as you hit an attack, you stop, right? So you can just jab to quickly stop the drive rush. So you can actually use it to bait things out. It's crazy. Also, like I said, you can cancel into drive rush from any kind of move that is normally cancelable anyway, right? Any kind of normal move that can be special canceled, you can cancel it into a drive rush. And that +4 frame data on the next attack is still applicable in the middle of a combo. So you can do drive rush cancels in the middle of a combo to extend it and get these special routes that you couldn't otherwise do. And it's crazy. I kept on seeing clips on Twitter, and every time I saw new stuff, it was impressing me so much. I have to say, if you're looking at my footage, you're not going to be seeing much drive rush stuff from me. I did use drive rush from neutral every now and then to try to do a strike throw mix up whenever I noticed my opponent was turtling quite a bit and I could disrespect them a little bit like that. But I labbed a little bit of drive rush combos and I realized, okay, this is going to take some time to get used to and to figure out and to actually get consistent with, because it's not easy. It's not particularly hard, but you really do need to practice these drive rush combos, right? So I only played Ryu. By the way, just for reference, I only played Ryu because I'm going to be maining Zangief, and I would have loved to play Zangief in this beta test, but lo and behold, he was not in this, so I figured, okay, well, if my desired main isn't in the closed beta test, I'll just be a normie and play Ryu. And I figured, since I'm playing a character I know I'm not going to main anyway, I don't want to waste a bunch of time doing training mode stuff, labbing all these drive rush combos if I'm going to drop him for Zangief later anyway. So I pretty much just learned a baby damage bread and butter combo from mid-screen. I learned a bread and butter in the corner, and I also learned a bread and butter with his Dinjin charge, because Ryu gets a new move where he can essentially it's down something. I don't even remember what the button was because it was all like muscle memory, right? But he can do down something, and then he essentially enters a state in which his next Hadoken will be powered up, or he has another move too. It's like a back Hadoken that also gets powered up, or his level 1 super Hadoken gets powered up. But it changes the frame data of the moves too. So his quarter circle back, it's like a back Hadoken. His back Hadoken, you can combo off of it if you have Dinjin charge, right? So I learned a bread and butter without Dinjin charge, and a bread and butter with Dinjin charge, plus a corner combo. So I pretty much just had 3 bread and butter combos, and I called it good, right? I got 3 combos, and I said, okay, that's good enough. I want to play online. I didn't want to waste any time doing training mode stuff with a character I didn't plan on maining, right? But if you look at other people's footage, if you look at high-level matches and just look at stuff people shared on Twitter, you'll see drive rush combos, and they look crazy, and I can't wait to actually get my hands on Zangief and start learning drive rush combos with him. So now we have parries. So just recapping, with the drive gauge, you have EX moves you can do drive rush, you can do drive impact, or parries, okay? So you have a ton of different mechanics that you can use drive gauge for, right? Which is another reason why it's really easy to just immediately deplete your drive gauge and then go into burnout, which you don't want to do. You have to be really thoughtful every time you decide to do any of these things. So when I say parry, you might immediately think Street Fighter Third Strike, right? Like, that's what I thought when I first saw the parries in my initial reaction video. However, even though it is arguably just as hype, if not more hype, than the parries from Third Strike, you shouldn't think about them like the parries from Third Strike. Instead of thinking about the parries like the ones from Third Strike, I think it would be more immediately useful to think of the parries like a stance, kind of like Reversal Edge from Soul Calibur 6, if you are familiar with that. So if you do parry, it's medium punch, medium kick, but you can make a macro for it, right? Obviously. By the way, I didn't even mess with the modern controls. If anybody knows exactly how the modern control scheme works, please enlighten me in the comments, because I kind of thought about checking it out to see what it was like, but I didn't want to waste time. I didn't want to waste any precious time in the beta test checking out the modern controls if I knew I was just going to use classic controls anyway, and I could just read what it was later, after the beta test. But at least with classic controls, it's medium punch, medium kick, but you can make a macro for it. So I'm just going to say parry button, but just know it's, a manual input if you want to do it manually. The parries are a stance, and when you press the parry button, you can do multiple things, okay? So if you press the parry button and hold it, you are in a stance, and you can stay in that stance as long as possible, provided you have the drive gauge, because as you are in the stance, your drive gauge is depleting, okay? This is why I think it's like Reversal Edge in Soul Calibur, because in Soul Calibur, you can hold down the Reversal Edge button. And something that threw me off at first was I was parrying things, and then I would try to punish them, right? Like, I would parry something, and then I would try to do a punish, and I wasn't able to punish them. So I was thinking, what the heck? What was the point of the parry if I couldn't punish, right? Well, if you just hold down the parry button and parry something, you are actually at the same frame advantage as blocking, okay? So you might think, okay, what's the point of holding down the parry button then if you're going to be in the same frame advantage as blocking? Well, being in the parry stance, it is essentially a universal block, right? You don't have to guess a mix-up, because it's going to parry overheads, it's going to parry highs, it's going to parry lows, and it can parry supers, okay? And it can parry drive impact. So holding it, it's basically just a universal block, right? But you really should only do that if you don't want to eat a mix-up, right? Because most of the time, if you're holding it, it's going to be because you mistimed a perfect parry, which I will elaborate on soon. But before I talk about that, also holding the parry. So if you're doing a held parry, I'm going to refer to them as held parry or tapped parry or perfect parry, okay? So if you're doing a held parry and then release the parry, you do enter a recovery state, which is another reason why I think you shouldn't think about these parries like third strike parries, but more like the reversal edge from Soul Calibur 6. So holding a parry and letting go of the parry button makes you enter a recovery state. A lot of people, when they saw that made them think that the parry was going to be really bad, right? Like super high risk, high reward. You don't want to enter a parry if they're just going to stand there and then blow you up when you enter recovery, right? But you can actually block on any of those recovery frames. You can just hold block on any of those recovery frames. So if they try to hit you when you're in the parry recovery, you can block it, right? And then it's no harm, no foul, right? You had to use a little bit of drive gauge to do the parry in the first place, but you block it and it's normal frame data, right? However, if you tap the parry, you actually recover faster, okay? So that's one reason to tap it. However, the perfect parry is how you are going to get frame advantage, okay? So holding it, just think of holding it like a universal block, okay? But a perfect parry is a 2-frame window, okay? So this is even more strict than Street Fighter Third Strike. This is objectively more difficult. It's objectively more difficult to get a perfect parry than a regular parry in Third Strike, okay? So getting a perfect parry is what you really want to go for when you do parries, right? That's what you should aim for. So that's how you get better frame advantage than blocking. So then you can actually do a punish that is better than what you could otherwise normally do just by blocking, right? But another way they increase the skill cap is that if you get a perfect parry and then immediately try to punish with something, yeah, it'll be okay, right? You'll get a combo or whatever kind of punish you want to do, but that damage is going to get scaled significantly unless you time it correctly. So you don't want to be antsy and impatient and just immediately mash your punish after the perfect parry. There's actually a sweet spot in the timing. You don't want to do it immediately after, but you have to get a feel for it. It's like a little bit after, immediately after, right? You just need to watch footage and see what the timing is. And then your damage doesn't get scaled. So this is what I'm looking forward to seeing at high level because, like I said, it seemed as if people figured out drive impact quite a bit. I think people figured out drive impact pretty fully in the beta test, right? People figured out how and when to use it, and they also figured out how to deal with it, right? Even then, it's still a prevalent mechanic, right? You have to always consider it, but it's not being used all the time. In fact, the threat of drive impact is debatably more threatening than the move itself, which is how it affects how people play the game, right? And then for drive rush, I didn't see, obviously at my rank, I made it to silver 5. I almost got into gold. I was literally 1 win away from getting into gold rank, but then I started losing a bunch. So silver 5 was the highest rank I got to, right? So at silver 5 rank, silver 5 gold 1 rank, you didn't really see people doing many drive rush combos. You saw some people doing some modest drive rush combos. You saw a lot more at high level, right? But even at high level, I think people were just starting to get the hang of drive rush, but I think parries are the thing that people did not fully develop their skill for at all. So that is what I'm looking forward to because people were literally learning new things about the parries on the last day of the beta test. So drive impact was sort of the most self-explanatory of the new mechanics, then drive rush, then parries. And like I said, that's what I'm looking forward to seeing. I bet once we start getting tournaments and once we start seeing like really high level gameplay, we're going to be seeing all this stuff perfect parried. And then you have all these optimal punishes after the perfect parry. And they're doing all these drive rush links. It's going to be crazy. And yes, you can technically recreate Evo Moment 37 with the parry in this game. But mind you, it's going to be more difficult because like I said, this is a 2-frame window. So good luck to whoever's going to be the first one to do that. My only critiques regarding the mechanics of the game is that I think the throws are a little too strong. The range of the throws, at least at first when I started playing, maybe it's like this in Street Fighter 5. I have to go back to Street Fighter 5 and see if it felt this way. I only spent like maybe 10 hours in Street Fighter 5. I played Street Fighter 4 casually, and that was before I got competitive into fighting games, right? So I played Street Fighter 4 pretty casually before I got competitive into fighting games. And then I tried out Street Fighter 5 after I had been getting serious about fighting games, but I never really played Street Fighter 5 seriously. I just kind of wanted to check it out and see how it was different from the other fighting games, right? So I definitely had to adjust when I started playing this game because not only is it a new game with new mechanics, but I had to really acclimate myself to the whole strike throw fighting game neutral, because even though I've been playing KOF recently, KOF has a much more rushdown focused neutral than this game, which is another reason why I was only like silver gold rank. But anyways, I think the throws, maybe the range should be reduced a little bit because the throw range is kind of ridiculous. Or maybe they just need to like lower the damage a little bit to just make it less enticing to use, because there are so many throws going on in every match. It is objectively really good. And I kind of got sick of constantly having to expect a throw and constantly just having to be ready to throw break, right? Even when I was the one doing it, I got kind of bored of just doing like throw when the opponent waked up, right? Like I got kind of tired of just timing meaty throw because of it being so good. But another reason why it's so good is because when you throw them, you're obviously like throwing them a distance, right? And so you want to throw them in the corner because the corner is so scary because of drive impact. Because as soon as you throw them in the corner, it turns into a different game. As soon as you throw them into the corner, or as soon as they throw you into the corner, it turns into a completely different game with a much bigger mental stack because of drive impact and because of the wall splats by proxy, right? Also, I think it's really funny that with Guilty Gear Strive, they actually made the corner less scary because corner combos will lead to the wall breaking and then the cornered opponent gets free, right? But in this game, they did the opposite because they made the corner even scarier. So I'm a big fan of that decision, just making the corner even scarier. In addition to the throws maybe being too strong, I'm thinking maybe it's a little too much to have players lose drive gauge as they are getting damaged by certain things. I don't know what the actual like list of things is that inflicts drive gauge damage in addition to regular damage, but I know supers do it. And I think it's a little overly punishing to have someone just eat a combo that ends with a super that also has their drive gauge depleting, right? Because then you could potentially burn them out. So they have to eat this giant combo that ends with a super, and then as soon as they wake up, they're going to be in burnout. So they're being forced into this Oki situation in burnout. So that makes the game really momentum focused, which I actually do kind of like. So I'm a bit 50-50 on that opinion. I just thought it was worth mentioning. I think fundamentally, though, the reason why that's worth mentioning is because obviously, you want running out of drive gauge to be punishing, right? So you want to force people to really think about if they should use drive impact or drive rush or a parry or an EX, right? But if they're getting comboed and they're getting hurt, they're not being put into a situation in which they have to weigh risk versus reward, right? Because they're already getting hit, they're already eating damage, so why should they be losing drive gauge on top of it? I think you should only lose drive gauge if it's a situation in which you yourself had to weigh the risk versus reward, right? So if I designed it, I don't think I would have even thought about having their drive gauge deplete as they are getting hit by certain things. Not only are they losing drive gauge while they are being damaged by certain things like supers, but the player that's doing the super, the player that is depleting the opponent's drive gauge as they are damaging them, that player who is doing the damage is actually giving their own drive gauge time to replenish it. Because even if you don't deplete it all the way, it replenishes. So whether it's depleted all the way or just depleted somewhat, theirs is going to be replenishing while the opponent getting comboed in a super has their drive gauge deplenishing. So I think maybe the opponent that's getting comboed into super should only have their drive gauge be frozen, maybe not being destroyed, right? Because if you kept it frozen and the person doing the combo having a drive gauge that was replenishing, the person who's doing the combo is already getting a benefit, right? They're already able to get a drive gauge advantage that way. So just something to consider. I don't think I really care whether or not they change that, because like I said, I kind of like how momentum based it is, right? The rich get richer. It makes the matches really fun, and it makes comebacks even more exciting, right? Because the only comeback mechanic in this game is that your level 3 super does a little bit more damage if you are at 25% HP or below. That is a very insignificant comeback mechanic compared to other modern fighting games, because it seems to be a common trend, like maybe the past decade. Well, I guess Marvel 3 is the biggest comeback mechanic of all, right? So I guess since Marvel 3, almost every fighting game has this extremely significant comeback mechanic. And I think they do it as a way to sort of entice new players to play the game by saying like, oh, haha, even if you're not that great at the game, you have a chance of making a comeback against a player better than you, right? They specifically did that with Strive. They specifically said that's why they have the damage so high in Guilty Gear Strive, is so that way a lesser skilled player always has a chance of making a comeback if they get a lucky hit, which I did not like at all. I did not like that philosophy at all. So I kind of like that this is the opposite of that. The rich get richer, right? If you start losing, you're going to start losing hard. But on the other hand, if you make a comeback, that'll make it even more hype. And I think that'll make it more exciting to watch. Like, not only more exciting to play, and more exciting to do comebacks, but just more exciting to watch at tournaments and stuff, right? So throws are maybe a little bit too strong, and maybe they should reconsider having drive gauge be depleted when you are already incurring damage from certain things. But those are super minor critiques about the mechanics, because this whole time I've been talking about how much I love the mechanics, right? Mechanics are really the reason why I love this game so much. Because I guess my one critique about the presentation is that the music's kind of hit or miss. I've seen a lot of mixed opinions about this, but I like Ryu's theme, I like Ken's theme, and I like Jamie's theme. But some of the other themes, I think they're pretty mid. I'm not feeling Chun-Li's theme. None of the music is particularly bad, but you have to remember, this is Street Fighter, right? Street Fighter and all of Capcom's games, really, right? Capcom has such a well-established legacy of having some of the most legendary music in the whole industry ever, right? So it's a pretty high standard to live up to. But I can tell you right now, these stage themes, the regular stage themes, it's no Suzaku Castle, right? And like I said, I saw opinions are kind of mixed on this, so this is highly subjective. I think the main reason why this soundtrack isn't really hitting as hard as older Street Fighter soundtracks is that older Street Fighter soundtracks were very melodic. They had a really strong melody, right? Whereas the music direction in this case, and it's really a case of direction, the music direction in this case, none of the songs really have that strong of a melody. Like I said, I think Ryu's theme, Ken's theme, and Jamie's theme are really good. Those are the three best songs in the game, or those are the three best songs in the beta test, in my opinion. But even so, even with me liking all three of those songs, I can't hum it. None of them are that melodically strong. I just like how it sounds, right? In the moment. But I couldn't even memorize the melody. So again, I think that's just a matter of direction. I think that whole critique, though, can be assuaged if they just do what King of Fighters 15 did and add a jukebox feature, in that they allow you to assign musics from older games onto stages, right? So like in KOF 15, and they keep on adding more soundtracks from different games with each update, with each major update of KOF 15. So maybe when Street Fighter 6 launches, you can have the option to assign music tracks from Street Fighter 5 and Street Fighter 4, and 3 and 2 and 1. And then maybe with each major update, they could add soundtracks from other Street Fighter games, like the more miscellaneous ones, like maybe Street Fighter Alpha or something, or maybe just other Capcom fighting games in general, right? Like Darkstalkers music or something. There's really no reason not to let people do that, right? So that's another minor critique that can be fixed really easily if they just do the whole jukebox thing that KOF 15 was doing. Also, Chun-Li, this is really random, but if you heard it, you might know what I'm talking about. One of Chun-Li's supers has a sound effect that is such an eardrum grating pitch. Like, it really freaked me out the first time I heard it. I thought it was a sound coming from outside of my headphones, like in the room or something. It's such a weirdly specific pitch, and every time I hear it, it throws me off. So maybe change that pitch a little bit. Not that that's a big deal, but that was very strange. Like if I were making the game, I would change it so that way it wouldn't sound so specifically alien compared to all of the other sounds in the game. But in addition to me just loving the mechanics and all that, I think another reason why I love this game is because not only is it mechanically sound, but this game has so many nice features and just miscellaneous things that shows that they put a budget into this game, and they definitely put care into this game. So, for example, and I had to make a list of all the things here so I wouldn't forget anything, and I'm probably still forgetting something, right? And this is in no particular order, I just wrote them down, right? So for one, when you want to watch replays, there is a very in-depth search. You can do a very in-depth search of your replays. So you can search by, obviously you can search by date, right? But you can also search by matchup. So let's say you have a certain matchup that's tough for you, and you want to watch and review your matches against this one character, right? You want to kind of critique your own performance in this one matchup to see what you're doing wrong, right? there are multitudes of reasons to watch your own gameplay if you're trying to get better at a game, right? So you can just literally search by matchup. Like, you can just have it pull up all the matches of you fighting a specific character. That's great. Also, I already mentioned this, but you get visible frame data, right? In the training mode. Not only do you get frame data in the game inherently at launch, and not only can you visually display it, which is a cool thing I haven't seen in any other fighting game, but there are other things you can make visible too. So for example, you can make the cancel windows visible. You can have your character flash red when you are in a cancel window. If you are trying to do a combo that requires a cancel and maybe you aren't getting it, or maybe you're inconsistent, being able to visually see where that window is helpful, right? That's really nice. Also, you can do rematches really fast. Like, the loading is really fast, right? I have an SSD on my computer, so that's probably helping it, right? But the game is inherently designed that you can just instantly rematch as soon as a fight is done, as soon as a match is over. Your character, like, obviously the character that wins will do his little victory quote, but you can just mash through it and skip through it and hit rematch. And it's so nice because you can get so many matches in with such little dead air in between. So it really respects your time that way. Also, speaking of frame data just a moment ago, if you're in spectator mode, also speaking of replays and frame data, you can view frame data when you're in spectator mode. So if you are watching a replay and you're trying to figure out what happened, why something hit you, why something didn't work, why something did work, and you're trying to recreate it, or you want to lab that same specific situation, you can literally see all the frame data in spectator mode. That'll also be cool for if you're just doing commentary, right? If you're commentating matches that already happened, you get to see everything that happened, all the frame data and everything. I can't believe this is the first game that did that, right? It's so many features that and I'm assuming many other people have been wanting in fighting games for so long, and it really feels like they're just putting everything in it. Another thing you can do in a match, you can actually start a vote for no contest. You can start a vote to just end the match without any one winner, and obviously that would be very nice if you ever find yourself in a match with a terrible connection, right? Because anybody that's played fighting games before, especially people that have played delay-based netcode games before, will have experiences in being match made against someone, and then the connection just tanks, and then you have to suffer through the entire match just to get out, just so that way you can be set free, right? But in this case, if you notice the connection's getting bad, you can literally just start a vote if you don't want to play it, right? And obviously, if the connection's bad enough and your opponent is a reasonable person, they will also vote yes to end it, right? And like I said, the game just respects your time because you can rematch really fast and you can vote to stop the match if the connection sucks. Also, this is something I've been talking about ever since I started playing fighting games competitively. And I'm sure other people have thought of this as well, but this is the first game to finally do it, even though it's such a simple thing. So players, two opponents, right? Two players fighting each other, they can actually be on a different stage at the same time in the same match. So one player can be seeing one stage while the other player, the player that they're fighting, can be seeing a different stage. And this is great because it finally sets us free from the people that always pick training stage, right? If you ever go to the Street Fighter V directory on Twitch and you look through the thumbnails of the streams, you're going to see a wallpaper of training stages, right? Because especially for a lot of high-level players, when you play a game for long enough, if you're playing a game competitively, once you put enough time into the game, you're not really seeing the graphics anymore, right? You're only really seeing the gameplay. So it makes sense why they would just mash training stage on stage select, right? Because why would they want to waste time picking a stage if they only really see the gameplay anyway, right? But as a streamer, I really do like changing up the stages, right? I really do like picking the stages that look good, and I like switching them up to add variety because being a streamer, I know that people are watching it, right? And they don't just want to look at training stage all day. Obviously, like professional level players can get by with it because people are watching them for the gameplay and the tips and the tech, etc., right? But as for me, I actually do like playing on other stages. So now, finally, I don't have to be held hostage by the training stage people anymore because they can play on training stage as much as they like, but I don't have to look at it because I can be looking at an actual pretty stage at the same time. So I was really happy about that when I discovered that. Also, another dub versus the training stage people is that if you set the stage to random, you actually can deselect training stage. You can deselect any of the stages from showing up if you have it set to random. However, I never actually found this feature. I saw someone else do it. I saw someone on a stream do it, and I could never figure out how to do it myself. But it is, in fact, an option in the game because I saw it happen. So I have to figure out how to do that myself the next time I get to play the game. Because I just set it to random, and I just had to cross my fingers each time that it wouldn't be training stage. And obviously, sometimes it was training stage because it is random, of course. Also, going back to the training mode, all of the great features in the training mode. Well, it's not even just for training mode. Actually, this is an option you can do in the game in general. So never mind that. You can actually just turn this on in general. You can turn on sound effects corresponding to different types of attacks. So what do I mean by that? So you can have overheads, like for example, let's say an overhead attack on hit, you can have that proc a certain sound effect. You can have lows proc a certain sound effect, which will be distinct from overheads, right? So when you get hit by an overhead or when you get hit by a low and you hear that sound, you'll immediately be able to know what it was that opened you up, right? Because let's say an attack's kind of fast, like maybe it's an overhead that's kind of hard to react to, and maybe it doesn't look like an overhead and they keep hitting you with it, and you keep trying to figure out why they're opening you up, right? You're thinking like, am I not reacting fast enough to the overhead, or is it even an overhead, or am I not blocking, right? You can know for a fact what it is if you set the sound effects on, right? I think it's like a symbol sound effect. This is another thing I saw but never found how to navigate to myself. So I know you can deselect stages from random, and I know you can add sound effects which correspond to different types of attacks, but I never found that myself. So if any of you guys played the beta test and you found it, let me know in the comments, or the next time I play the game, I'm just going to have to like actually ask someone and figure out how to do that because I really want to do that the next time. Also, apparently, I don't know how people actually did this. I don't know if people actually played CPU opponents in the beta test or not, because I don't remember seeing anything about CPU opponents. But I know for a fact people have fought CPUs before, and I also saw people set up CPU matches of CPUs versus CPUs at max level so they could just spectate it. Because the whole reason they set up CPUs versus CPUs is because apparently in this game, the CPU opponents are actually cracked. And I'm not talking about SNK boss syndrome level of cracked, right? I'm not talking about being cracked in that way. I mean, these CPU opponents apparently actually act like human opponents, which is amazing because up until now, fighting CPUs in fighting games has never been a good recreation of fighting against a human, right? Obviously, when it comes to like SNK bosses, it's kind of fun to fight them just to see if you can do it, but you have to fight them completely differently than a human, right? It doesn't help you. Learning how to beat a really difficult fighting game boss in the single player mode is not going to help you fight real human opponents and vice versa, because they're completely different games, right? Because the computer is going to behave so much differently, and certain things will work on a computer that won't work on real people, and vice versa. Certain things won't work on a computer that will work on real people. So finally, we get a game that will actually give you satisfying CPU opponents to fight, that will actually give you good practice for fighting real opponents, which is amazing. So I'm actually really looking forward to that because the game is going to have like a single player mode. It's not a story mode per se, which I'm glad about because story mode would use up too much of the budget in my opinion. But this is going to be like an overworld Metro City. And it's kind of like, it looks sort of maybe Metroidvania-esque because, and mind you, this wasn't in the beta test. This is just from the trailers. But you can go around to the different world warriors. Like for example, you can have Chun-Li teach you spinning bird kick, and you can use it in the overworld to traverse certain things that require spinning bird kick. So I'm thinking it's going to be kind of like a Metroidvania overworld. But that means it'll be actually fun to play, fighting against the CPUs in the single player mode, right? Because I actually really liked the whole idea of the Soul Calibur 6 single player stuff, and I was really excited to play that. But then as soon as I started playing it, like after 30 minutes, I realized these CPU opponents are super easy, and it's kind of just not mentally engaging, and it's kind of a waste because if the CPU opponents were more satisfying to fight, then the single player stuff in Soul Calibur 6 would be really fun. So I'm actually looking forward to the single player stuff in this game, especially because we'll be able to take our absolute monstrosities into the single player and actually use them as a character to fight opponents with, because the character creator in this is so funny. You might have seen the thing I created, but I don't know why they let you create such weird looking characters, but I'm glad they do, and I really hope they don't change that. I also saw a theory which I think would be hilarious if it ends up being true. But I saw a theory being talked about that the absolutely wacky character creator in this game is actually sort of a prototype for the character creator that'll be in Dragon's Dogma 2, which actually makes a lot of sense because in Dragon's Dogma, you can create pawns, and a lot of people, myself included, made the weirdest, funniest looking pawns ever, like a CPU helper in Dragon's Dogma, essentially. And so if they use this kind of character creator for Dragon's Dogma 2, we can get even weirder and funnier looking pawns than ever before. So I'm looking forward to that. Well, I'm already looking forward to Dragon's Dogma 2, but that'll be funny if that ends up being true, right? But anyways, this game is so full of user-friendly features that makes the experience so streamlined, and it makes it so easy to practice things and to just get to where you want to do, like get to where you want to be and just do what you want to do. It is so nice that Capcom's actually taking pride in this game, right? You can tell that they put a budget into this game. You can tell that they put care into this game. Like, there are a whole bunch of hidden things, for example. So, for example, I think I already talked about this. Your level 3 super animations, they have a unique animation if you're at 25% HP or below, right? They could have just made it where they do more damage, but instead you get an extended animation, which looks even cooler. And a whole bunch of other little things that people were discovering along the way. Like, for example, Kimberly's level 3, she has a music player, and at the start of the level 3, she plays music on it, and it persists for the remainder of the match. So it's kind of like an install super after the active part of the super, because it's a buff that lasts for the remainder of the match. And whatever soundtrack was playing gets replaced by the music she's playing. But if you're in a Kimberly mirror match and both Kimberlys use their level 3, it actually adds lyrics onto the song, which is a cool Easter egg, right? You get a whole extra music track. You get a version with lyrics. Also, Chun-Li's taunt does damage, so you can actually finish off an opponent with Chun-Li's taunt, which is hilarious. As for Jamie's taunt, it actually changes with each drink level because Jamie has a mechanic in which he's able to drink alcohol, and he has 4 different levels. At 4, he's at max level, right? He gets access to more moves and better frame data, I think, with each drink level because he's a drunken kung fu archetype. But with each drink level, he has a different taunt, and each taunt gets progressively more and more obviously drunk, which is hilarious, right? And I'm sure there are a whole bunch of other things like that too that we've yet to discover. And keep in mind, we only had some of the characters that'll be at launch because this game is going to have 18 characters at launch. And this playtest only had Ryu, Ken, Luke, Jamie, Juri, Kimberly, and Guile. Hopefully the next beta test will have more characters. Maybe the next beta test will have all of the characters. That would be crazy. But whether it's the next beta test or when the game actually launches, when we get access to more characters, it's going to be so crazy getting access to all of these extra characters all at the same time and having to learn all of this unique stuff about all of these characters and all of the extra frame data from parries and drive rushes and all this stuff. It's going to be a lot of stuff to learn, but it's going to be very fun learning it all at the same time as everyone else, right? I'm sure people are going to have to be posting stuff on their own character, right? Because I'm going to be playing Zangief, so if I discover stuff with Zangief, I'm going to have to post it because other people are going to be discovering stuff about their own characters that they're playing. So it's going to be a very fun collaborative project whenever this game comes out or whenever it gets another beta test with more characters. So all in all, I think we can safely say Street Fighter is back on top as the premier fighting game. I don't know about other people, but in my mind, Street Fighter has always been the definitive fighting game, considering that all fighting games post Street Fighter 2 used Street Fighter 2 as a basis, right? All fighting games are an adaptation or an adaptation of Street Fighter's 2 mechanics in some way. So it was so lame and disheartening to see the state of Street Fighter 5 for so long. Obviously, Street Fighter 5 got better in its more recent seasons of DLC and updates, but it was just so disheartening to see Street Fighter 5 kind of be the punching bag of the FGC for so long. So it's so nice that Street Fighter is back on top. The Capcom Redemption arc is almost complete because it started with Monster Hunter World, and then we got the Resident Evil 2 remake, and then we got Devil May Cry 5, and it was so weird because Capcom was popping off with all of these games except for their fighting game division. So finally, the prophecy is fulfilled, or almost fulfilled, once the game comes out. So let me know what you guys think. If you played the game yourself, if you got into the beta test, if you actually got a code yourself, let me know what you thought. Let me know if I missed anything or if I misunderstood anything, because it was a lot to take in. And if you are one of the many people who did not get a beta code, well, first of all, don't feel bad, because a lot of people didn't get in. Like, for example, none of my usual Twitch viewers got a code. So it was just me, even though I was looking forward to playing with viewers. I just had to play with randos the whole time. So if you didn't get to play, let me know if you have any questions. Be sure to leave them in the comments sections, obviously. So with all that said, I will see you guys later, and bye for now. He's doing EX wake up a lot. Ooh. That broke his DI. Could have punished better. So EX Dingeon Fireball can break through a DI like that. It's good to know.